So joining us now from the Pentagon, Press Secretary John Kirby. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Good to see you this morning, sir. So as Alex just reported, there are these talks that are going on. But President Zelensky has said that victory is the only acceptable outcome for Ukraine, and that they will not trade any of their territory in this war and in these discussions. You were asked this week how you wanted to see this end, how the United States, I should say, wants to see this end. And I just want to remind what you said there. Watch this.
Sure. We want it to end, and we want Ukraine's sovereignty, all of their sovereignty, their borders as it was before the end of February, to be respected.
So you say the borders before the end of February to be respected. At that point, Russia had already occupied Luhansk and Donetsk in the Donbass region and Crimea. So does the United States consider those to be Russian territories when you talk about those February lines, or Ukraine?
No, not at all. Not at all. We never observed any Russian occupation or ownership over Donetsk or Luhansk, and we certainly have never recognized their illegal occupation and presence in Crimea. We're talking about all of Ukraine, and they have a right to their own sovereignty and to their territorial integrity, and we support President Zelensky in his pursuit of that end.
Okay, so speaking of territorial integrity, I think there's been a lot of focus, and rightly so, on this helicopter attack that took out a fuel depot inside of Russia near Belgorod. So Brett Baer interviewed President Zelensky and asked him specifically about the origins of this attack, and here's what he said.
Did you order the attack into Russian soil, the Ukrainian helicopter attack on a Russian military depot across from Kharkiv?
I'm sorry, I do not diss any of my orders as Commander-in-Chief, the leader of this state. There are things which I only share with the military armed forces of Ukraine, and when they talk with. You need to understand that on that territory that you mentioned, you have to know, they were placing their shooting systems and firing those missiles themselves.
So, Admiral Kirby, the last part of that sounds like Ukraine ordered that attack. Did they?
Well, I won't get ahead of President Zelensky. He's the commander-in-chief of his forces, and I'll let him speak to the operations that they conduct. That's the appropriate thing. We want to preserve as much of their operational security as we can. So I think that's really for him and for his generals to talk to. What we have seen, though, Martha, is across the country, and your reporter just laid some of this out for your audience. The Ukrainians are pushing back. They are recapturing ground that they had originally lost to the Russians in the early days and weeks of the war. And that includes around Kyiv. As Russian forces move away from Kyiv, the Ukrainians are moving in. In fact, they're attacking them while they are moving away. So they are definitely clawing back territory that they had earlier lost.
So, but just with regard to this attack, because an attack inside Russia would be a change in the way this has been played out so far.
Sure.
Would it be possible, you know, there's that video, right? You can see these Mi-24 attack helicopters. Would it be possible for Ukrainian helicopters to disguise themselves, to look like they're Russian helicopters? There's been talk of a false flag. Would that be something that they could pull off potentially?
Well, again, I won't get into Ukrainian tactics here. I think you can understand why. But the Ukrainians have been very nimbly, very effectively defending their airspace and defending their troops on the ground. And they're doing it with a multitude of systems and weapons, most of which, a lot of which, are coming from the United States and other countries that are contributing to their ability to defend themselves. But again, I don't think it would be wise for me to get into specific tactics that they might be using on the field of battle.
Yeah, I spoke with General Petraeus this week, and here's what he had to say about if this happened, and then we'll move on from this topic. But I want to ask you one more question here. Watch this.
Sure.
How can Russia be outraged if there's an attack just inside its territory on a fuel depot when Russia has been actively attacking fuel depots throughout Ukraine since the very beginning of the invasion? So the idea that there should be outrage if indeed these two Mi-24 attack helicopters turn out to be Ukrainian is just ludicrous.
Do you agree with him there, sir?
I think General Petraeus raises a really important point we all need to keep remembering, Martha. Russia is the aggressor, and they are attacking inside Ukraine very, very brutally. I mean, it's not just that they're hitting oil and weapons depots and airfields. I mean, they're hitting residential areas. They're killing civilians. They're hitting schools and hospitals. I mean, they have shown no effort to be discriminate in the kinds of attacks that they're launching through airstrikes. So do the Ukrainians have the right to defend themselves? Of course they do. And again, we're focused on helping them do that just as more effectively than they are right now.
Indeed, we are. And there's a new $300 million package that includes the switchblades that have been discussed over the past several weeks, which I'm sure they're going to be very happy to have in hand. But so is the United States committed to continuing to send military firepower, equipment, all of this to Ukraine, A, for as long as it takes, and B, even if they do start striking within Russia?
President Biden has been very, very clear on this, Martha, that we will continue to help Ukraine defend itself through security assistance, such as these articles we're talking about, as long as we can and as fast as we can. And I would add that of that $800 million that the president just recently signed out in the middle of March, I mean, those shipments are arriving even as we speak, including in the last 24 hours. And a lot of that is lethal systems, Javelin anti-armor missiles, Stinger anti-air missiles. That stuff is arriving even as you and I speak.
And that would continue even if Ukraine extends its attacks or expands them into Russian territory.
I will tell you again what the president said. As long as we can, as fast as we can. They need these articles to defend themselves, and we're going to continue to provide them.
So there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not President Biden doesn't want to provoke President Putin, whether or not that has been part of the strategy in all of this. Brett asked President Zelensky a little bit about that, and here's what he said.
I don't know if President Biden is fearing President Putin. I believe that he doesn't. I want to believe that he doesn't, because he's the leader of a big nation, a great nation.
So I ask this because we just canceled an ICBM test after North Korea did a test of their own. And back on March the 2nd, it was postponed. And you said this is not canceled, this ICBM test that we were planning on carrying out. It has just been moved to the right a bit. So now it's been canceled. So what does that say?
Well, look, there's other ICBM tests that are scheduled for later in the year, and they are still scheduled to be later in the year. We are confident in our capabilities in terms of ballistic missile capabilities, that they're still ready, that they're still sound. This test is just one of many that will be conducted and have been conducted in recent years. So we're confident in that capability. Look, President Biden has been nothing but direct with President Putin. There's no fear here. President Biden sees President Putin for exactly what he is and the kind of leader that he is and the kind of unprovoked aggression that he's conducting inside Ukraine. And we are doing everything we can as fast as we can to help Ukraine defend itself. We're also doing an awful lot to bolster the eastern flank of NATO. We just added additional aircraft and some forces in just the last 7 days. So we're trying to help Ukraine defend itself. We're going to make sure NATO can defend itself. But we also have to be mindful that Russia's a nuclear power. And so as we make these decisions, it would be irresponsible for us not to think about making sure we don't escalate this conflict any bigger than it already is.
But is that why the test was canceled and not just postponed?
I think there was a prudent decision at the time to take a knee on that and to not launch it where we were in space and time in the early goings on here with respect to this invasion. It was the right thing to do. Now the cancellation is not just a factor of what's going on in Ukraine. It's a factor of other modalities as you get these tests. After a while, when they're postponed for a given period of time, at some point it just becomes the logical thing to cancel that one and move on to the next one. And so that's what we're focused on.
Okay. Thank you, Admiral Kirby. Always good to see you, sir. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.